This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 495, live from DrupalCon. On today's show, we're live from DrupalCon talking about our favorite things in the future of Drupal with our guests, Jared Ponchot and Dave Hansen-Lange. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guests today are Jared and Dave. Jared leads design at Lullabot, applying his passion for design and the creative process to leading a talented team of strategists and designers, creating great experiences and systems for Lullabot's clients. Dave has been working with websites since 2003 and has been active with Drupal communities around the world, sharing a passion for improving Drupal's administrative experience, maintainability, and effectiveness. As 4Kitchen's Director of Technical Strategy, he's responsible for prioritizing, coordinating, and leading technical projects while guiding client strategy.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise.
I'm Nick Laffin, founder of Enlightened Development. Today, my co-hosts are joining us for the fourth week as guest host, Andrew Barry, VP of Technology at Lullabot. Andrew started with Drupal back in the mid-2000s with a university student website, which eventually led him to joining Lullabot in 2010. He has worked on and led Drupal projects for organizations including NBC, the American Booksellers Association, and the state of Iowa. When he's not doing that, you can find Andrew dialing in espresso shots and nerding out about home automation.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Also joining us for the whole show, Martin Anderson-Klutz, Senior Solutions Engineer at Acquia, and joining us as usual, John Picozzi, Solution Architect at EPAM.
Hello,
Welcome, everybody.
DrupalCon friends.
All right. You may have heard on May 2nd, we were recording episode 500. We were planning on having a special guest, which is hopefully you. If you're interested in being on episode 500, you can visit talkingdrupal.com/show500. That's the word show and the number 500 to learn more. Everybody's welcome. All right. Let's just jump right into the main topic. So everybody, I think except for me, is at DrupalCon right now. What has piqued your interest? And I don't know who wants to go first, but
We'll let Martin go first because he raised his hand.
I mean, I feel like the two big announcements at the Driesno yesterday were really this new idea of site templates, as well as the proposed marketplace as a way to really introduce the concept of paid add-ons or paid site creation templates. But really, I think the impetus there was really around having sort of a library of paid themes as easier on-ramp for people who want to potentially use Drupal as opposed to something like Wix or Squarespace, because that has been a key difference, is that ability to, for a smallish amount of money, be able to have something that looks pretty good out of the box and then potentially tweak from there. So to me, those were certainly in the Dries note, the two big things. And in fact, there's actually a discussion that Dries is hosting later today to talk about those two things specifically. So those are the things that I've been hearing people talking about since late yesterday. So yeah, interested to hear what everybody else thinks about those.
sounds controversial.
I mean, I thought it was interesting, Martin, that you really led with it being paid, right? And what I took away from it was that was like a maybe, right? Like the example included paid templates for other competitors and so on, but that's also such a huge shift in the world of Drupal. Like, even if we decided as a community to do that, there's probably a lot of work to get there.
Absolutely. I mean, there's even a lot of questions around, like, would it have to be on a separate domain, right? Because today, anything that's on Drupal.org, has to be the GPL license and some of those kinds of things. So would a paid marketplace be on like Drupal.com, right? There are a bunch of those things that would bear discussion. You're right. It's not guaranteed that it would have to be paid. I mean, the other thing that somebody I was talking to was saying they were at a table where the way their discussion went was, if we go down the road of paid themes, is it just a matter of time before we also have paid modules?
Yeah, I mean, we already do have paid modules, and I've been seeing them more and more. And whenever I see a discussion around it, it's always people basically saying we don't do it like that. Still, I mean, it's pretty resounding.
I mean, when you say paid modules, though, let's add some fidelity there, though. You mean like there is a module in Drupal.org that is free that you can download and apply to your site and get some sort of base set of features, right? And then there's a paid like pro tier or something like that. That's what you're talking about, right, Nick?
Yeah, that's mostly what I'm seeing.
Okay.
A paid pro tier, or I don't think people have problem with like paid support or paid service. Like I never saw people complain that backup and migrate integrated with Node Squirrel, and if you use Node Squirrel, you had to pay for it, right?
Right.
That's a service.
I mean, like the Cloudflare module, right? You can use, there is a path to use it for free, but you can also pay for Cloudflare services, right? So like, I mean, I think like, you know, when there's a service attached to it, like I guess maybe
yeah, people don't have a problem with that.
like for me, it feels like you're paying for the service, you're not paying for the module.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so an example of what Nick is talking about is a let's say a popular calendar module that on its project page basically says that, you know, all of the new advancements, support for the latest version of the underlying calendar library, for all of those, you know, goodies that you're expected to go to a paid version that's not hosted on Drupal.org. And even from what I've heard in the issue queue now, a lot of the issues that are being posted to the project in Drupal.org are being closed as go to the paid version.
Which is the antithesis of kind of the Drupal spirit.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't sound great.
But coming back to like this original marketplace thing, it felt like Dries was very careful to frame it as, here's something that we're going to consider over the next 6 months. Let's get everyone's opinion and thoughts on the implications of this and come together as a community to figure out whether is this really the best way forward? Should we go another direction? So yeah, just want to make it clear to anyone who didn't hear the Dries note that it's not like, oh, we're getting this in 6 months and it's going to change everything.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah,
I do have clients that have paid for themes too, by the way. So I have some smaller clients that hired me to help out on the technical side, get them on Drupal 8, and they did most of the, you know, they're sole proprietor like I am, so they want to do most of the stuff themselves and then just have my assistants, right? And I'm happy to do that. And when it came to theming, he purchased a theme. And I will say that while the customizations we had to do were not pretty, and many of the times we were fighting against the theme to get things done, I can't deny that his theme was far cheaper to implement than a typical Drupal theme is.
But you still needed to kind of like do the work to implement it, right? It wasn't something they did themselves.
Oh no, they did. So it's kind of like I don't know, it wasn't Bootstrap, but it was like a Bootstrap like theme. It's like you purchase it, you put it in the site, see what works, see what doesn't, tweak what you want.
Yeah, but who did that? Who did that work is my question. Was it you or was it them?
Both of us. So he did some of the stuff, like he changed a lot of the colors and things. This was also 8 or 9 years ago. But you know, there were some things where he's like, okay, on this page, these views just don't work and I don't know how to tweak it. And so I helped him out with that. But I do have to say, I'm hopeful that in the world of single directory components and CSS variables and some of the tools that I still haven't used, but I've been seeing coming out of like UI Suite, I have hope that there is going to be the ability to have kind of pick and choose what you want and pull down a system and just say, these are my brand colors, here's my logo, and generally have a well-designed site. And then if you're looking at it, you're like, you know, I don't like how this accordion looks. Well, it's a single directory component. Just override it with your own and tweak it however you want. And I think that experience where you kind of have a full fleshed out site and you're just tweaking pieces lends itself towards medium and smaller sized businesses adopting Drupal a lot faster, because you don't, like right now, you start with all of it. You have to start with the starter kit, which doesn't look like a website until you put 40 hours of work into it, right? So I haven't listened to the Dries note yet. I didn't have a chance to. But anything that improves the theming pathway, I think, for new sites and smaller sites, I think is generally a good thing.
I assumed during that section of the talk that most of the questions that were immediately popping in my head were represented on those colorful post-it notes in that Miro board that he was showing, because there's a lot of questions that it seemed like he was thinking that the community was going to have to answer in order to make this a reality. And yeah, one of the first questions I actually had was, will this support things that are not paid? Because there's different kinds of marketplaces, and even the example that he showed, the Webflow one, that's a mix of things that you can choose for free and things that you can pay for. And I could see an ecosystem, growing more if it's not super restricted to one or the other.
So I think like I don't know. As I told Martin, excuse me, the other day, like I struggled with this, and like listening to Nick, I'm like, okay, okay, this is kind of exciting. This, I can see like the value, and like he raises a great point, right? Of like a place where you can go and buy a quality theme, right? You're buying
I will not put the modifier quality on the theme that was purchased.
But that is like to me, that has to be the differentiator for this thing to succeed, right?
Oh, yes.
Because like once somebody pays for something, they expect a certain level of quality. And I'm not like, dear listener, please don't send me nasty grams about the following comment. But like when you go and install, because I mean, Drupal has like a theme library, repository, like page area, whatever you want to call it, right? Already, right? And all of those are like, hey, you do a composer command and you get this theme, right? Or you download it and you get this theme. And like, it's painful in a lot of cases to like use the theme because there's a lot of configuration and there's a lot of like things that you need to change to get it to look like the picture that was on the theme page, right? I feel like if we're going to have a marketplace, there has to be some sort of quality gate to say, hey, you've met this minimum quality requirement to charge for your theme, right? And I mean, in that instance, based on what I've heard from Nick and what I've talked about with Martin and others, like that makes a whole lot of sense to me, because it gets us closer to that kind of, and I know nobody likes this analogy, but that Squarespace model where I can go create my site with my content, or I can go pick a theme from a pool of themes, go add my content, and then get like 95% of the way there to launching my site. The last part we got to figure out is how we add the domain and the hosting package without like causing somebody a huge like amount of brain work. But I think that'll come. But I think my point here is that like we already have like a theme marketplace, if that's what you want to call it, but it's kind of like hard to use and nobody pays for it, right?
The thing is, if we solve those first two problems, we have to think about that second problem, the domain and hosting bit. But if we solve the first two problems, there'll be more demand, and the hosting platforms will build the one-click installs again, and they'll handle that onboarding, right? If we provide a tool that small businesses can use to get a fully fleshed site, they'll use. The market will meet that.
So I'm actually also worried about the opposite problem, which is I feel like once we implement a marketplace, somebody's going to build, whether AI or some kind of automated tool to bulk generate themes that are going to be fairly low quality. Maybe they'll only charge $2 or $5, but the problem then becomes now you've got a marketplace that doesn't have 20 or 100 themes available, but 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, most of which are low quality. And now as a site builder, I have to sift through all of those.
Yeah, and I think what we were talking about earlier might help that, if there's like some sort of gate that you've got to pass through.
Right? Like there's got to be, I feel like in order to be in the marketplace, right? It feels to me like you have to have some sort of, I don't want to say evaluation or test, but like some sort of criteria that you're meeting in order to say like, hey, you can be in there. Like to me, it's almost like, and I'm not suggesting this, so again, don't send me nasty grams, but like it's almost like, you know, if you had a high quality, highly used module and you wanted to start charging for it, right? Like there are certain things on Drupal.org when we're evaluating modules that we all look for that are like, oh, this one is good and the one that I should use, right? Web forms comes to mind, right? Like I think if we were to take that and build a criteria for like how do you get in the marketplace and you could check all those boxes, then like yeah, like then you know you can charge $5, $10, $20, whatever you want. But I think the quality has to be there because
I mean,
I do agree with Martin. Like once it gets polluted with a bunch of like meh themes and or it's just going to be a mess.
I mean, the inverse is also true though. Like the amount of work to maintain web form is unsustainable, right? And it's something that Jacob has been very open about and has been exploring a solution for a very long time, right? So, and I think, I mean, the amount of work that web form takes is kind of the exception rather than the rule for modern modules in Drupal.org, but that's not true for themes. You can't build a great theme and then be like, yep, we're done. We don't have to update this for 5 years. Browsers change and break your theme.
Well, I mean, Drupal's also changing too, right? So there's a good possibility that like if this were to happen in the next year, the version of your theme that you build now is not going to be the same version of your theme in 3 years, right?
Yeah, especially since it's going to rely on site templates because that's a collection of functionality, content types. I actually think it is what will invite like I'm a designer who's been in the Drupal community since 2008, but it took me almost a decade before I actually contributed anything within because there didn't feel like a good way to or a good place to have it live. And even working on Olivero, it was incredibly challenging because, you know, great design solves an actual problem for real users. It helps people do a specific kind of thing. And even designers who are very visually focused still want to design something to a use case. And so designing themes in Drupal historically has been like, what is the style visually, but there is no use case, you know? And so site templates, I think, could invite designers in saying, no, okay, create a great site design for a restaurant site or something like that and put it out there. But it's going to depend on functionality, you know, modules, content types, things that are going to probably be impacted by version releases and whatnot. So that's actually like one of the questions I had is like, how will these be maintained, and the marketplace itself? How will it be more compelling than the Drupal themes currently? Like the Webflow example that he showed, again, there is a team of designers that like control what shows up on there. You know, when people want to, you know, it's curated. You know, so
so I'm gonna make a mental note that we probably need to have a full show about this, and I'm gonna make a comment, and then I'm gonna ask another question, so we can move on to many of the other things that we saw at DrupalCon so far. But I think, Jared, to your point, like you're right, it's gonna bring in a lot more designers into the community, which is awesome. I also think it's gonna maybe change business models for some companies, right? Like instead of being like a small like, hey, I gotta like forage for jobs sort of scenario. They may turn into like, hey, we're theme developers. Like we develop 6 themes and they're high quality, and you know that's just what we do, and that's how we get paid. I don't know. I think it's interesting, and I will say now, Martin, that we've had this conversation with all these really smart people. I feel a little bit more optimistic about it, but I do realize I do agree with Jared too that I think there are still a ton more questions. All right. So, Jared, one other thing. Well, first of all, let's pause for a second and acknowledge the fact that Nick is not at DrupalCon, but this Dries note was specifically made for Nick. The analogy to Drupal and Lego literally was amazing to me. And then the use of Lego in the keynote, I was like, why is not Nick not here to witness this in real life? Also, Nick, I think you should write Dries a thank you note for him marrying your two passions together. With that said, another part of the Dries note, and the part that I actually found more interesting than the marketplace was Experience Builder, and more specifically, Dries showed a demo of AI creating a component within Drupal. So Jared, I'm gonna put this one in your camp first. We all saw it. Dries took a picture and put it into AI, the Drupal AI agent, and it created a component for him. Was amazing. Question is AI coming for our jobs?
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that. What was funny about that demo to me, which I found really impressive, and to be honest, like there's a lot about Drupal CMS that's moved farther faster than I anticipated when it was all announced, and kind of how I imagined this functioning within the community. And so I think that's a credit to a number of people who have worked very hard. It's kind of mind-blowing all that's happened already. What was funny to me was I didn't think already we'd be having people demoing Figma, like mapping a Figma to a component build and having it mostly work. The funny thing to me was that I've been hoping that what AI would do was actually reduce design QA need. That was the one thing left in that demo, was like, boy, there's a lot of design QA to get this actually perfect. So, but it was pretty impressive. I still have a lot of questions about sort of the real power of Drupal in terms of structured content and sort of modeled content that creates like consistent patterns for authors who don't want to think like a designer. How some of these things map to entity types or something within I have a ton of questions about Experience Builder. I can't imagine it's quickly coming for engineers or designers jobs yet, because everything I see feels like there's a whole host of things for people to do to wire it up and make it work the way people want it to. But yeah, sorry, that was not much of an answer.
Oh no, that's fine. This part of the fun of this show is like we kind of might not have exact answers. I mean, I think like you're absolutely right with the like people have to wire it up, right? Like so I went to a couple of AI, like Drupal AI sessions, and I was like, yep, there's still a bunch of stuff to like, configure and write prompts to get the output that you expect from the input that you're getting. Dave, I'm wondering like how you felt about well, maybe Experience Builder in general, but also the AI like generation of components.
Yeah, I am really excited about the potential for Experience Builder, and seeing how it's, like Jared said, it's starting to come together like much faster than I anticipated. And it's really leapfrogging our current paradigms with either paragraphs or layout paragraphs or layout builder, where I talk to like the content creators that I work with, and they're like, it's not quite like as draggy droppable, like in place editing as I really would like it to be. And what we see with Experience Builder is it's just so much smoother, the experience, and just even like previewing things at different sizes, it's all built right in. Undo, redo, publish a bunch of changes at once, like all of those things working together is really going to make the authoring experience so much smoother and so much more, maybe it can give those people more flow, where currently it's their workflow is a little bit more blocky and like one thing at a time. And yeah, I see a lot of potential here. It's just like, as some of us were saying earlier, like how do we actually get there? Like there's a couple key steps still missing, and like there's still implementation across different sites is still gonna be required. And so yeah, like there's potential, there's journey. We just got to get there.
Yeah, I think if you haven't tried Experience Builder, like they have a path to install kind of like a dev version of it. And they like a lot of caveats, it's dev version, like so things aren't going to work 100%. But yeah, I was at Drupal Camp New Jersey 2 weeks ago, and Mike Anello was doing a Drupal CMS training. And at the end of that training, there was a little bit extra time, and he was like, "Oh, let me show you Experience Builder." And we walked through like the installation process, and just from like that to like what I saw yesterday, there have been so many great improvements that I'm like, wow, like this thing is moving super fast, and that's awesome. I think like a lot of the, Dries highlighted it in the Dries note yesterday of like, perfect is the enemy of good enough. And I think like for a long time, the Drupal community has been like focused on perfect as opposed to focused on good enough for a beta, for an alpha, maybe not for a full release, but like, and like, I think that's helping to accelerate the kind of development process and accelerate the features that we're seeing. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, something that I think about is like, just to say that like it's not just the changing of what we consider good enough in terms of making, work like Experience Builder go faster, but honestly, there's like just a ton of people working on it, right? Like I can't think of any prior Drupal initiative that had as many people working on one subsystem at the same time. There's probably some that get close to it, but and there were probably some where there were that many people, but not like in a team with organization and structure and planning and goals and all that. Probably the bigger projects that happened were more in like the traditional open source, like just people putting their time in and working on something that was interesting to them. And so I think we're seeing how like, hey, if you invest in a thing, you're going to get something better than if you don't, right? And I think that's actually goes all the way back to when Drupal CMS was first announced at DrupalCon last year, trying to get more investment in the Drupal platform from users and agencies and so on. And I think we're seeing that, which is great.
I'll be the naysayer since we need it. I think it's good to have that perspective. So I think Experience Builder has huge potential. And I think one of the pieces of that potential is just the ability to, or one of the goals to be able to just include like a Vue or a React component. I think being able to just kind of pull from the collective front end options from React, I think would be a boon to Drupal if we can clean that up. The thing that scares me is the underlying structure and the security implications. Every time I have to interact with Layout Builder, as great as it is, the underlying data is painful to work with. And it makes things in Drupal in general painful to manage. Just bedrock assumptions of Drupal, like views, things like that, just don't work great with Layout Builder. And I'm worried the same thing will happen with Experience Builder. Now, I don't think that is reason enough to stop releasing Experience Builder. I think what it's doing is important enough that we can kind of try to figure that out after if we need to. But as a developer, one of the promises was, hey, somebody can configure this on the live site. You pull it out down, and then it'll be code, and you can tweak it and fix it. I'm skeptical of that promise. But yeah, we have to see.
Nick.
We have to see what happens.
John, I'd also like to go back to your original question, which was, is AI coming for our jobs? I would say what we're going through is on the same scale as like the Industrial Revolution in terms of the kind of overhaul we're going to be seeing. So I would say AI is coming for the jobs we have today, which means we have to be figuring out how we can incorporate AI into the work that we do, make us more efficient so that we're going to be set up for the jobs of tomorrow.
It's interesting because I was talking to some really smart guys at MIT last night, and I think Martin, you're right. Like our jobs are going to change, and like I think I always go back to the fact that like, hey, listen, AI is not magic. Like there is a developer building the AI, right? So like development is going to be needed, but I think a lot of what is going to end up happening is going to be like we're going to have to become really good prompt engineers, right? And we're going to have to become people that know how to talk to machines as opposed to people that don't know how to talk to machines. So I mean, like, I don't know. I think the landscape is going to change. I don't personally believe it's coming for our jobs, but I mean, listen, if I can put an image into Drupal and it can make a component, I don't know. I can find images on Google pretty easily.
For now.
And I can put them into Drupal and it can build me a component. So now I don't need a designer or a developer. I don't know.
Sure, but like if you saw that demo yesterday, it's like, oh, it created a component. Yeah, it was a little bit off in many ways in like the visual, the underlying code. And if you do a lot of that, you're gonna have troubles with consistency, maintainability, and other things too. You're still gonna hit a wall. But the fact that you could get up and running quicker without like needing to hire an agency to create something simple, like that's great just to like get people up and running. And then when they do hit a wall, then they can come to those of us who do this professionally and can get into that pipeline. So I'm bullish on that part.
It's interesting because a lot of the people I talked to yesterday about it were like, yeah, it's cool, but what does the code look like? And I was like, all right, like I see that angle. And then I went back to them and go, hey, listen, I'm sorry, but a marketer does not care what the code looks like.
Mm-hmm.
What they care about is that they put in an image and they got out a pretty close replica in code of what the image they put in, right? And I mean, I think
I was just going to say, it's also worth noting that the demo that we saw yesterday was put together in a couple of days. So like with some more work, I'm sure the output of it could be much better, but that was almost like a proof of concept. So, for it to have gotten as close as it did in really a couple of days effort, I think is also telling to, the power of the platform that it's built on.
I'm sorry, Martin, are you saying that the Dries note has Disney Video Magic built into it?
No, I mean, Dries said that, he sort of had it in his call. He mentioned to Jamie that this is something that he'd like to be able to include in the Dries note as a demo, and figuring like the answer he would get back was like that we can do that, but it'll take us, X number of weeks. And 2 days later, Jamie was like, here's this video of what we've been able to piece together in a couple of days. And that's basically what was in the Dries note.
Yeah, I took it that way as well. Which is why there was still a lot of design QA work to do, but it sounded like that was what actually made me think, well, will this be a tool at some point for design QA? And all of my thoughts around that go back to kind of what Dave was saying, which is like systems, like, and the kind of clients we work with. I think there's so much of Experience Builder when you see the demos of it that it's like, this is going to be the most amazing tool to use Drupal to make a 6-page brochure site. And nobody used to do that. But to create a design system and a platform with Drupal that allows authors to produce content across a network and maintain brand consistency, UX guidelines, like all these things. It's going to be interesting to see how Experience Builder fits into that. And I actually want a lot of my questions around Experience Builder are around things like, how will permissioning work and how granular can it be? The kinds of things that you can assign to different roles, what they can and can't do. It's very focused on the final visual presentation of a full page view of content, and content in Drupal is more than that. And so how do you create great editor experiences when there are other things that you need to capture for use for other display modes across a system? And, there's a lot of things like that I'm curious. I confess I'm a designer, so I've not had lots of spin it up on my local and kick the tires on it yet. So
Yeah.
maybe there are answers for all those questions. I also missed Lowry's talk yesterday, and I'm looking forward to watching back that.
I mean, there's other like bedrock requirements too that I see a lot that still require. I mean, it's not hard, but it requires custom code, right? More and more, I'm getting clients who like say, okay, we want to be able to include a grid on this page that contains content, and that grid of articles, right? And maybe we want to handpick 3 articles, or maybe we want the latest 3 articles, or maybe we want the last 3 articles tagged with XYZ, right? And none of that logic is particularly complex, like I said, but you still have to write code to be like, okay, if they chose this as the source and this tag, then do this, or have this pull in this view or pull in that view. And if we have the ability to kind of map some of the, or put some of that logic in a way that Experience Builder can interact with it, I think that'll be one of the most impressive things. Like if it's just everything is, you pick this component and you manually put the content in, I mean, that's still valuable, but is that going to kind of revolutionize how people work with Drupal?
I mean, I
don't
think
know.
yes, because if you couple that with the design, right? Like, I'm not a designer. I know it might be shocking to some of you, but like I think like, I agree Drupal's great at content structure, but like if I could install Drupal and get a default list of components and drag them out onto a page, add some content and have it look great on the front end, like that's a huge win for me in my inability to design things and want my websites to like look good, right? So I mean, I think yes, like that's what we're marching towards, right? I thought the other thing that was interesting was like, and I heard this a lot yesterday too, was like, well, I use Layout Builder. Is there like a path from Layout Builder to Experience Builder? And from Dries' keynote and kind of playing with Experience Builder, yes, there is, right? So like Layout Builder is using your blocks, right? Is using blocks as layout vehicles, right? You now can take those same blocks and use them with Experience Builder. So there's going to probably be some sort of migration that you have to do from like a regular Layout Builder page to an Experience Builder page, but the community is super smart, and I'm sure somebody will develop some sort of module or migration script that will kind of maybe help you do that in some way, shape, or form. But like that was a key point yesterday where I was like, all right, I see how this kind of could play in the ecosystem as it is now.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
so
something
go
that'll be
ahead.
interesting to see is how quickly those migration paths get written. Because I think the better Experience Builder is, the more people are going to be like, oh, I built a new site with Experience Builder and I do not want to go back to Layout Builder or paragraphs or whatever it was they were doing before. And if you start to see an explosion of like, here's the 5 different ways you may have set up Layout Builder, and we've got migrations paths for all of them, I think that is really going to show that Experience Builder is doing what it's supposed to do.
I agree. I think the FOMO on Experience Builder is going to be very, very large. Like once it gets to like prime time and it's ready for a full release, like people are going to be like, how do I get there? How do I get there as quickly as possible?
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Experience Builder. We've talked a little bit about Drupal CMS, but I'm curious about other demos that you guys have seen. So maybe we can do a round robin. Maybe start with you, Dave. have you seen any other demos or features at DrupalCon other than CMS and Experience Builder that you're excited about?
Coming back to AI,
I should have
I was in
excluded
an
that one too.
AI session yesterday about one of the demos that I saw in it was this workflow for a municipal transit system who had to give refunds on tickets when like a train was behind schedule or something, and someone could submit their like a photo of their ticket. AI scans the ticket. AI then, and this is all step by step, not one giant thing. AI reviews the schedule and compares to see do they match up, or is this someone trying to trick us here? AI reviewing, okay, like how late was it? Does this qualify for the refund? And it goes through all this workflow in these different steps that you can plan it out. It's not just like AI. One big question: AI, tell me, is this refundable or not? It's very planned and it's auditable, so you can see, oh, this is why AI decided to do it here, but not over here, and so you can tweak that. It's more reproducible than what we think of normally as what we get out of AI. So yeah, when we see how AI can do those kinds of workflows, I think that really shows potential that like our clients can get behind and not be quite so fearful. Like, what's AI gonna do? Is it all of a sudden gonna, I don't know, make me look bad or whatever? So like, I think we're starting to get to the point where AI can actually solve some real problems, hopefully. So yeah, that's one thing that I'm interested in.
How about you, Jared? What have you seen at DrupalCon that has you excited other than CMS, Experience Builder, and now AI?
Yeah, yes.
AI and tickets.
I think site templates definitely got me excited because of what I said earlier. I've wanted there to be something like that in Drupal for a long time. So, and have a lot of curiosity about how we'll pull it off. I did catch Mike Herschel did a session before the Dries note that was kind of about, in classic Mike Herschel style, it was about all the things. It was sort of like the future of theming, SDCs, like AI, Experience Builder. But he was showing the code editor in Experience Builder and like the ability to build components in Experience Builder, and was showing a concept of how an AI module might be able to integrate with Experience Builder's component builder, and that was fascinating to me. It made me think it could kind of, to what I think I don't know if it was Dave or Martin was saying, like it could change the way developers do certain kinds of things. But I'm very curious about the use case of it, because it feels like it's making very granular changes to a specific thing on a site that started out maybe in a code base. And I'm actually really fascinated with just like, how is this going to work in actual like Drupal platforms, so that was really interesting. I don't know if any of you have seen any playing around with AI integration with that. And I was also fascinated too with, I heard that the code builder in Experience Builder is not using Twig because of security implications, and so everything that's created within Experience Builder is actually, I guess it's React, or it's some other yeah.
So but before we actually move on, can you, for people that haven't seen the keynote yet and our listeners, can you quickly go over what site templates are?
Oh, sure.
Times.
Yeah. So, and this is my understanding anyway. Dries used the helpful metaphor of the story of Lego, and it like started out with bricks, and then eventually, like, they started selling kits where you could like have different kits of bricks for doing certain kinds of things, and he sort of extended that metaphor to the idea of recipes, and like the idea of us bundling up certain specific functionalities together is Drupal moving towards having what Lego had as kits. And then, but when Lego as a company almost, was destroyed, like about to go under, they ended up saving Lego by getting into world building, where they partnered with other brands to create like the Star Wars world, and then you could buy like whole, collections of things. And that was sort of his metaphor for site templates, which would be the idea of collecting up not just, multiple recipes even into a kit for creating a kind of site. So like here's a site template for a yoga studio site, or for a restaurant site, or for a coffee shop site, or for yeah.
Okay. Andrew, how about you? What have you seen at DrupalCon that is not any of the above that has interested you?
I haven't seen too much in terms of additional demos, but I'll throw one out there, which was I actually mentioned in the intro, we did some work with the American Booksellers Association, and their folks were in the Drupal navigation session, just in the audience. I was just sitting with them because Christina and Pablo were giving a talk about, what's been done in the last year for the whole left sidebar navigation and what's going on with the top bar and all that. And they showed me like the navigation on their platform for their booksellers and bookstores. And, that was just super neat to see it in the wild, right? Like, because how long has it been since we first had screenshots, mock-ups, demos of redoing Drupal's core navigation? And, it's not like, something new and exciting, but it's something that's done. And I really love that in the world of Drupal, that there is initiative, work was done, designs were created, code was written, and now people can use it, right? And that's definitely something in the next day of sessions and so on, I'm hoping to see reflected more.
Awesome. How about you, Martin?
One thing I'd like to point out that I feel like was kind of notable in its absence was actually almost any mention yesterday of Drupal core. So I feel like the focus really having, at least so far, basically entirely shifted already to Drupal CMS really says that certainly in terms of how we intend to talk about Drupal to the world, certainly outside of the developer community, has already become Drupal CMS, which I think is pretty interesting considering we just had the first stable release back in January. So that was pretty interesting. There is a session later today, Gabor talking about what is the role of Drupal core in the world of Drupal CMS. I'm hoping I can catch that, but just thought, that was interesting to see, like, there was never mention of Drupal 12 that's coming out next year. And, what are the preparations, or what are the considerations of things that might drop out of core? Like that, a lot of those things that I feel like a couple of years ago might have been parts of the discussion in the Dries note, there was none of that. It was all, the things that we've already said we're not going to talk about. But I thought that was just pretty interesting. I will say the things that I've seen that are on the list of, or align with your list of things not to talk about. There weren't a lot of demos, so I did see a session. The Media Current guys were talking about the design system that they're building for Drupal. That was pretty interesting. Also at the community summit on Monday, had some really good discussions with JD Leonard about the member platform that he's working on. And since I'm working on the event platform, trying to sort of also talk about what are the ways that those two things could potentially work together. So that to me was really interesting. But yeah, you've already excluded all the demos that I saw. So
sorry. And finally, I think the hardest of the bunch, because you went last, John. What have you seen? You'd like to talk about?
I mean, I've got a couple of things, but Martin, now that you've raised that very, very, very great, like intelligent point, I feel like now I'm like, well, what is coming in Drupal 12? Like what is happening? Oh no, I've missed something. That was super interesting. Yeah, I as it was happening, I didn't even realize it was happening, but you're absolutely right. As far for me, I actually saw a great session yesterday about workspaces, And I was kind of like a workspaces naysayer because I was like, I don't know. Last time I tried to use it like a year and a half ago, it was pretty wonky. But this session was started off with some slides and then went into a live demo. And I always I have a soft spot in my heart for people that do live demos because one of my first Drupal talks was a live demo, and I'm like, oh man, things can go so sideways. But yeah, this was great. It really highlighted I think the power of workspaces, and even talked about a couple of additional modules like workspaces extras and parallel workspaces, which you can add to kind of like enhance the capabilities of workspaces to be um, better for like editing the same sort of content in multiple kind of work streams. That was super exciting to me. I kind of was like, oh, I think I'm going to give this thing a try now. It might be another tool in the toolbox. And then Martin mentioned the community summit. I helped organize the community summit this year, and I emceed the community summit on Monday, and it was really great to see like a room full of veteran Drupalers as well as new Drupalers coming together to kind of like talk about the community. And we had some great we had a great panel on some Drupal initiatives, and we had a fireside chat with Tim Doyle, and those things to me like were so great because we opened up the community summit Slack channel. We kind of highlighted it at the beginning of the summit and said, hey, ask your questions in there. And like the community asked some really great questions, some of which were a little uncomfortable maybe for Tim to answer because they were more about the future of Drupal and kind of the status of the DA's the financial situation. But I think it was just a great open forum to be able to get answers to some of those things that aren't abundantly clear to a lot of people, right? So I think those were kind of the two highlights outside of the exclusion list that I thought were helpful and useful. All right. The next question is mine. So, Martin, actually, Andrew and Martin, I think already alluded to this a little bit, but I'm wondering, what haven't you seen yet? So, for the listener who's listening to this sometime in the future, we're recording this on the Wednesday of DrupalCon. So we still have all day Wednesday and contribution day Thursday to kind of go through. So I'm wondering what haven't you seen yet, or haven't you talked about yet, that you're interested to talk about with your remaining time here at DrupalCon? And Jared, I'm going to give you the opportunity to go first.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my biggest hope was actually to get my head around, like I said, some of the details things with Experience Builder. And unfortunately, I think most of the sessions happened yesterday, and I'll have to watch them back. So, but I'll cede the floor to somebody else to see if you have more interesting.
Dave, what about you?
I always really love contribution day. And specifically, I go as a mentor for the first-time contributors.
Oh, awesome.
That is so much fun. Just like sitting down with like some starry-eyed newbie who like wants to contribute some way. They don't really understand how or what, and we just get paired up with the table and like work them through the process. And inevitably we get to a state where like I don't know the answer, but I know that in the next room there's someone who does know the answer. So I run over to the general contribution room and get some input from like a longtime core contributor who can give us some direction. Yeah, and it all just happens so quick because it's there in person, live, and yeah, and people get engaged. And wow, I did something. I changed 2 characters of code, and now something that I did is running on hundreds of thousands of websites across the world. Yeah, it's great to get people to that level.
Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, Martin, you got me thinking when you're like talking about like Drupal core and Drupal 12 and so on. And something that I don't think has come up with Drupal CMS is like, are now that there are some like historically used everywhere modules like Path Auto as an example. I think they probably redirect, those sorts of things. Um, we've talked a lot about what needs to be part of Drupal CMS. And I know there is like a Drupal core product strategy document you can find online. There's a PDF with it there. But I wonder at what point some of these things, which have just, people are just going to assume that Path Auto is part of Drupal even more than they already did. And I'm picking on that one module, but I wonder like at what point we start to see some real commitment in core pulling in some of the features that were just no one even debated about in Drupal CMS. Like no one said, "Oh, we should not have clean URLs." No one said, "Oh, we don't need to support redirects." It's just like these are just table stakes for any website. And yeah, I'm be curious to see if there's discussions around that over the next day or two.
So yeah, I mean that's an interesting one. I mean I don't know. I don't know that you're picking on Path Auto. I think most of us would agree that like, hey, Path Auto should probably be in core because it's used almost everywhere. But I'm wondering, Martin, if you have anything that you're looking forward to, or anything that you want to get more info on, maybe.
So I want to actually start by just dropping like one little tangent on what Andrew just said, which is I think Drupal CMS is going to reach a really interesting milestone next year when Drupal 12 does get released, because all of those dependencies that are in Drupal CMS notionally we'll all have to have Drupal 12 compatible releases before there can be a Drupal CMS release that's built on Drupal 12. So it'll be interesting to see how the community is able to sort of navigate that. So I'm really interested in seeing that, but that's obviously not going to happen at DrupalCon. In terms of DrupalCon specifically, I'm excited about the concept of site templates, but I obviously have, as Jared said, lots of questions. There is a session later today. Tim Plunkett and Adam, who folks in the community will know as Fen Proxima, are leading a session about the idea of distributions and how that's evolved, and I feel like it's going to lead into site templates as sort of the new model going forward. So I would love to see that. I actually have to have booth duty, unfortunately, at that time, so I'll see if I can maybe do some horse trading to make it there. But that's definitely one I'm really interested to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing is all of the sessions are recorded, so you can watch them at your leisure, but there is a little bit of something nice being there in person, right? I'm wondering, do we think that in the next kind of Dries note, which will be DrupalCon Vienna, right?
Vienna,
That's next, right? Do we think that at that Dries note, like we'll see more Drupal specific talk as opposed to Drupal CMS and Experience Builder and AI, or maybe a split of the two? I don't know. Anybody? No. Okay.
I mean, I actually think there's like an intentional decision being made to make Drupal core the plumbing that it already is, right? And if you think about like what a keynote is and what a keynote does, like unless there were to be something that would directly be user visible, thinking about like the persona, I forget, I mean it's made up, but the marketer persona that they had at the in the keynote, right? Um, you know, if that persona doesn't care about what's going on with Drupal core, then why would it be in the keynote? Is my read on how they're being structured right now.
Yeah. So I mean, Nick and or Martin as core contributors, how do you feel about being likened to plumbers?
I mean, I think I've probably said on the show before that I actually, for myself, like I will do core contribution when it aligns with something that I'm really passionate that needs to evolve with sort of Drupal core. But for myself, day to day, I just enjoy contrib development. I think the interesting thing moving forward is when you're working on a module that's not part of Drupal core but is part of Drupal CMS, is that going to change in terms of expectations? Like I've already had some great conversations with people involved with Drupal CMS about accessibility issues with modules that are in Drupal CMS, and it's amazing to get that feedback, and even have people jump in and provide additional guidance in terms of what the ideal state there looks like. But I think I expect that will need to change in some ways because of the increased sense of, as Andrew said, these things, people almost assuming they're part of Drupal because they're part of Drupal CMS.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen none of the modules I maintain are in Drupal CMS, I believe, but just even in the contribute channel, I've seen a lot more chatter like, "Hey, there's this bug. It's affecting Drupal CMS. Can you please fix it?" And so I think there's more pressure on, whether it's good or bad, there's more pressure on maintainers of those modules to make sure that things are kept up to date, things are cleaner, things are a good experience. I've seen people are pretty responsive to it. Now, when that turns into, I forget who brought it up, but I think it was Andrew, when that turns into the Drupal 12 upgrade process, I think that volume might be a little painful. But I'm also seeing a lot of contrib modules that are just saying like, hey, we support greater than Drupal 10. And that means that the upgrade process to 12 is easier in that Composer will install it, but I think it's also going to lead to some broken websites when something doesn't work on Drupal 12, but Composer lets you install it. So I'm a little, and Path Auto, just because that's the example that was brought up, Path Auto is one of those. It supports greater than 10.2 right now. And so there's not going to be an upgrade path. If it doesn't support Drupal 12 and they don't, like who knows what the upgrade bot's going to do with that too. Like, we'll see. All right. So DrupalCon is only a couple times a year, sometimes 3 times a year. So I think it's a good time to reflect and look at the future, what we think. So I think it's that part of the show where we predict the future of Drupal. How do you guys feel about the future of Drupal? Maybe we can start with you, Andrew. How do you feel about the future of Drupal?
I feel cautiously optimistic about the momentum that Drupal has managed to build up within its own community and maintain over the last year. I remember thinking at the last North American DrupalCon, one of the other big tests of Drupal CMS would be like, how much effort and how much progress is going on in a year, right? After the newness has worn off and so on. And I mean, I think as a community, that's really awesome that so many people are still involved, that companies are putting resources into it. And, even for, talking from Lullabot's standpoint, like we're probably not going to use Drupal CMS directly on projects, but if there's all these parts of it which we could use and take advantage of and are even doing today, right? So I think that is great. I am. If you look at the web as a whole, it feels like the web's under a lot of pressure right now. And, I would say the other side of that coin is I worry that if the web becomes less relevant over the next year or two, then it's going to make it a lot harder for Drupal to succeed simply because it's part of that ecosystem and there's just no way for us to get out of it.
That's a scary thought, but it is something to consider. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think Drupal is well suited for powering a lot of the experiences that people are moving to. And I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, I assume you're talking about a more app focused experience, a more AI focused experience rather than a browser.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at thinking back to the personas that Drupal is targeting, and it's not just Drupal, it's like every site building platform is targeting those personas. They are the go-to for online communication for those is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, those sorts of things, right? And just as a person, I am finding more and more small businesses out there that don't have a website, don't have a domain, that 5 or 10 years ago absolutely would have.
Good point. Well,
Yeah, okay. I didn't mean to like, you know,
yeah, with that
oh
note,
man, that
no,
was
I think this is going to be, I mean, just as a blanket statement, I generally agree. I'm cautiously optimistic. A lot. I mean, I personally don't see myself using Drupal CMS for new clients in the real short term, right? I still start from core, but Drupal CMS is bringing so much great energy and it's great. I generally agree. But I think I think this is gonna be a sober talk about the future of Drupal. So
I just want to piggyback on that a little bit though, right? So like I mean I see two paths forward here, right? And I think like this group of people is all in this path, which is like advanced Drupal users that are going to probably go with Drupal core, but you are probably going to start using more recipes, right?
oh yeah.
Like a blog recipe.
Yeah.
Like I literally again was at Drupal Camp New Jersey 2 weeks ago. Mike Anello was doing a training where he was doing Drupal CMS. He installed the blog recipe, and I was like, huh, I wonder if I could apply this recipe to my current blog because this thing is way better than what I got going on. Right. Um, and I think as like super users, advanced users, whatever you want to call us, right? Like, I think like the path forward here is going to be Drupal core with recipes, maybe even in the future, site template, right? And or a paid theme, right? So I think like what we're going to see is like the group of people that are smaller businesses, new users using Drupal CMS as an entry point, right? We're going to probably use a lot of the stuff that they're using. We're just not going to use it as part of Drupal CMS. We're going to use it as part of Drupal core. Right? Like everybody would agree with that. I'm seeing nods for those people listening to the podcast, right? So that's where I think like we're going. And I know you weren't going to pick me next, but I'll just answer the question because I'm talking and then I can be quiet for the next 10 minutes. I don't know. I'm always optimistic about the future of Drupal. I was at Adobe Summit last week and I have seen a lot of clients move from Drupal to Adobe, right? And that is concerning for sure to me. I even talked to somebody yesterday at DrupalCon that was like, we're looking at Contentful. And I'm trying to build the case as to why we shouldn't do that. And I'm like, huh, okay. Well, let me talk to you for about 10 minutes about why that might not be the best idea. And it was a good conversation. The person I think felt that they had some insight as to why that might not be a good path, but there are other platforms out there that are for better or for worse eating our lunch, right? And that is concerning to me. And I think there's great momentum in the Drupal community to push Drupal forward and make it a great platform that people come back to, right? And we all know that there's a great community around it. So I'm very positive on the future of Drupal. If we can get to what Experience Builder is promising, I think that is a key to the next evolution of Drupal. Sorry, I was a bit of a downer too. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
We're putting all the pressure on the end to make this a positive future Drupal.
We'll let Martin go last so we can see how he can brighten things up here.
No pressure. Dave, how about you? How are you looking at the future of Drupal?
Well, here, let me give it a shot to like start sad, but like try and turn it around. Like it's no hidden thing that like we're starting to enter like a broad economic downturn. In technology, we've already been in an economic downturn, and in the web too. And Drupal has not been immune to that. Like we've all been hit from that. But the temptation in being in that is like to be sad and to continue to do the same things that we were doing. But if we do that, like it's just going to continue to get worse. So we need to look at this as an opportunity. Okay, what are we seeing in the broader market? We're seeing like people who are becoming disenfranchised with monopolies. We're seeing people, especially outside of the US, worried about being tied to things that are strongly American. And so there's a lot of opportunity with that, with Drupal and what it can be. And hey, if you go with Drupal, then you're not held hostage by some big monopoly. You have the flexibility to grow and do whatever it is that comes for you in the future, and not be tied down. And if we can lean into that more and bring all these parts together with Experience Builder and site templates, and also continue to grow like the higher enterprise stuff, like that's going to bring us to a stronger and a better place. And so I see the momentum heading us in that direction. I see all the pieces that can come together. So I'm excited for where we can get to from here, even though right now it feels a little bit tough.
Let's go to Jared for hopefully
Yeah.
more uplifting comments.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I've been thinking, like like everything in life, and then like even in my own career, we were talking about like, is AI going to eat our careers? Even like so often, like living well looks like figuring out how to control what you can control and do it the best you can. And I've been actually pretty impressed to see Drupal as a community and a project begin to like really take control of the things that we can control. It feels like that's the path we're on, and that does give me hope. I think there's all these things about the web right now, about the world right now, like and technology sometimes follows culture, sometimes it moves culture, and it feels like we're in a very strange time, but I think that Drupal as a community is doing the right things to do the best we can to control what we can control. I was a little braced for, because there are a lot of agencies, especially in the Drupal space, that have had a lot of struggle of late. So I was a little nervous coming to DrupalCon, to be honest, that it was going to feel sad to me, that I was, that it was going to, what's the energy going to be like, and to be honest, like it kind of has buoyed me a bit to be around everyone in the Drupal community and to realize that, I don't know of another field. Like I have lots of friends that have all kinds of careers that go to like trade shows and whatnot. I don't know that there's a lot of other spaces where you have even competing agencies who really come together and like support one another in tough times, do the best to try to find ways to partner, even like finding work for each other's people who they don't have enough work for. I mean, it's kind of amazing to watch the Drupal community in tough times, and so that also gives me hope. I think if any community can work together to create a better world for ourselves, this one can. So I don't know. That's where my hope lies, I think. And it's also, in the exciting, like I said, I'm actually kind of impressed how far some things have come so fast since, was it 11 months ago that Dries did the Starshot talk? So, I mean, that should give us all some hope too, the amount that we can accomplish so quickly together. So,
Yeah, I wanted to say, I mean, really quickly, I just want to say, like, when Dries announced Starshot and was like, yeah, this is existential, it's like part of me wondered, like, is that hyperbole? Is that like how existential is it really? But yeah, after this talk, after what we just went through, like I think it was. And I think Drupal will be around for a long time. I think we made the right decision as a community following that leadership. I think Drupal CMS has the potential to keep us in the bring back some of that growth. But even if it doesn't, at least we didn't go into it without trying something new, right? If we have to find something other than Drupal CMS to push it forward, that's fine. Drupal CMS has been a huge success, even just in the collaboration side, I think. Okay, we're about to wrap up. Martin, We need to end on a smile.
Super
What's the future of
sunshiny and
Drupal?
positive. Go.
All right,
No
I'm
pressure.
gonna probably follow Dave's model of maybe start off not so optimistic and then try and end off on a high note. So talking about specifically that idea of the downturn, I mean, we all know people in the Drupal community who are in a difficult position right now, and as a community, I feel like in almost 20 years in Drupal, I've never seen this kind of a mood in terms of the number of people impacted, particularly people in like senior positions. That being said, I feel like to some degree that's also a very North American centered perspective. To the extent that we all know colleagues who are losing their jobs in North America, there are parts of the world where they're aggressively hiring for Drupal jobs, and I feel like to some degree it's also part of a broader globalization of Drupal. So we're seeing an uptick of Drupal in places that are lower cost centers, which of course is not great for those of us in North America. But on the other hand, potentially longer term leads to a lower um, cost of developing Drupal websites if the people doing that work aren't charging at the same billable rate. And so potentially that could actually be a healthier thing for the future of Drupal. Um, I will also say, a couple of people I talked to about various aspects of things like the marketplace kind of had the sentiment of, you know, that's amazing, but it's something that we probably should have done 3 years ago. And I think from the perspective of going after sort of the Squarespace or the Wix kind of markets, I kind of feel like that's going to be a tough slog. I'm not saying it's not worth it, but I also feel like even if at the end of the day, all it does is really make a much simpler on-ramp for people who have never used Drupal, giving them a sense of like, I can try this thing out, throw together a POC, and maybe that's not going to turn into a Drupal project 6 months from now or a year from now, but maybe 2 years from now. And so I feel like there's value in that. John, I would like to be as optimistic as you that the piece of getting the domain name and the credit card and now the website is live is 5% of the effort. I'm skeptical that it's higher than that, but I hope I'll be proven wrong. But the thing that I wanted to end on is actually not from DrupalCon itself, but when I was at Florida Drupal Camp last month, I got talking with a woman who's actually from the WordPress community. And she had been an organizer there and like really a central hub of the sort of Florida WordCamp community, WordPress community. And had gotten sort of frustrated with certain things in WordPress that once you went beyond a certain level of complexity were kind of limiting. Obviously, there's some chaos in the community there, but had decided to start exploring alternatives. Came over to Drupal and really was blown away at how certain things are so much easier in Drupal. And so I really hope that we can start to get that kind of message out to other communities like WordPress and so on, that this is an opportunity for new people to try out Drupal and see all of the greatness and all of the reasons why we're all so passionate about Drupal. So that's what I'm really hoping we'll see. And what the promise of Drupal CMS can deliver is making it easier for people that are new to the Drupal community to really experience all of that power.
Yeah,
You accomplished your job, Martin. I feel optimistic about the future of Drupal.
Yeah, I think one follow-up note to that, and Martin is like 100% right. Like, I think the power of Drupal, like the software obviously is great, but the power of Drupal is really in its community. And going back to the community summit, I think like the DA is working to get off the Drupal island and go to other conferences and spread the good word of Drupal, right? And I think that Martin, you're spot on. Like I think that effort and the community growing outside of North America is definitely two very bright spots and super positive. So congratulations. You were able to raise us to the level that we needed to end the show.
All right. So thank you, Jared and Dave, for joining us. And thank you, Andrew, for the last 4 weeks for joining us as guest hosts.
Yeah, thank you. I was really glad to do it.
Thanks for having me.
Super fun, y'all.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on the socials with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing Become a Patron. All right, Jared, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably just via the Lullabot website or on LinkedIn. I've left some of the other social medias in the last couple of years and only recently become active on Blue Sky. So J Ponch when you find me on social medias, JPONCH. But
Awesome. And Dave, how about you?
LinkedIn's probably best. Dave Hansen-Lange on LinkedIn or at fourkitchens.com.
And Martin, how about you?
Folks can find me on all of the Drupal and social channels as Manclue.
And Andrew, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me as a Deviant Integral on Drupal.org and the Drupal.community Mastodon instance, or LinkedIn is Andrew Barry.
And John, how about you?
You can find me personally at Picozy.com or on the socials and Drupal.org as at John Picozy. You can also find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
See you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Yes.
yeah, thanks all.
Thank y'all.